All right, welcome to the SEO Science Show with Josh Bachynski. The SEO Science Show is the show that talks about SEO in a scientific way. We try to reverse engineer the algorithms by isolating them in a single variable environment to provide the finest in scientific knowledge. I will be your host, Josh Bachynski, for today. Today we've got a special treat. I interviewed Christian from OMG, and he talks to us about his SEO theories. And poor Christian, I was going to ambush him a little bit because I wasn't expecting a lover of science, but he turns out to like science. And so I'm going to play the interview for you guys, and I'm going to give my color commentary kind of over top. Full disclosure, Christian did not know I was... he did not do any homework to find out this was an SEO science show, nor did the VA that sent him here. So he was ambushed a bit, but he's a really good guy. I didn't mean to ambush him at all. He turns out he's into science. Turns out he's a really good guy. And he has a really cool plugin that you should all test. I'm not saying it works. I'm saying you should test it. But if it does work, it could be really cool. So I'd like to play the video for you now and give you my color commentary over top of it. And also, if you have any questions, put them in the top right-hand side. I will get to those at the end of the interview. And it's a very interesting conversation about the state of SEO, where it is now, how SEOs think, where SEO theories come from, kind of what they're charging, what they're doing. And I'm not going to pull any punches in my color commentary. But again, I want to say this is not coming from a place of malice. I think Christian's a good guy. I think he's one of the good ones. He's definitely not kind of what I'm referring to when I talk about the snake oil salesman. But I am going to have my own opinion on some of the things he talks about. So, he does come around to science at the end. So we'll see how that goes. So let me display capture here, and we'll play it. Okay, so... we have with us Christian. I won't even try to pronounce your last name.
Shastok.
I understand my last name is European as well. If you want to introduce yourself there, Christian, so people on my show get to know who you are.
Sure. I'm Christian Shastok. I've been an SEO now for 13, 14 years, mainly UK based. I worked for some of the best agencies in UK. I've spoken at a few conferences, run some training sessions, and for a while now we've been partnered up with online marketing gurus, and we are currently promoting our SEO plugin. It's a free WordPress plugin for FAQ Schema. So I'll be talking a little bit around that, but I'll try to limit the self-promotion to the minimum.
Sure. So tell me, well, go ahead and do it now. So tell me, what is this plugin that does FAQ Schema?
Yeah, so a while ago, I noticed that Google started to display those extended snippets in the results a lot, like the FAQ snippets when you have the free answers below someone's website and you can expand them to get even more questions and answers. Mm-hmm. And I started to implement it for my clients with some success, but I had to do it the manual way. And then I've realized, well, it's time to automate this stuff and speed it up, right? And also give the clients the ability to do it themselves. So we've made the plugin together, and it's pretty useful. The only competitor that I had at the time had a plugin for just the posts and not the pages or the category pages, etc. So it was very limited. So we very quickly surpassed the downloads. We're at 700 plus or 800 plus users at the moment, active installs, and slowly growing every day.
Okay. And what do you think that does for SEO? Why did you make this plugin? What benefit do you think this has?
Well, the most obvious one, the easiest one, is obviously on the first page. You only got as much space, right? Once AdWords took their spots from the top, or Google Ads, the top 4, then you appear there. If you're number 1 or number 2, it's a very good idea to push back the next competitor down the page a bit. And those free expanded answers and the little expand button there, they do just the job. So it helps straight away to move the competitor down. I also see it a little bit like, in Google Ads, you can have the site links. Mm-hmm. And obviously in organic, we've got site links too. Well, you can't always get those site links, so you can't have the extended messaging. Now you've only got the title and description. This way you get 3 extra lines of text where, with a little bit of luck, you get to put something interesting about your business. And that again draws people's eyes. Many people don't even know. Go on.
I see. Okay. And do you see this FAQ snippet, is it firing on brand searches, or do you see it firing on other kinds of searches? And here we start the questions, the more scientific questions. And poor Christian is forced to answer.
All kinds at the moment. Actually, brand. You know what? On brand, I haven't noticed. I haven't even tried with like compound queries with like brand and a generic. But I've seen it on plenty of generics. And the good thing is you don't have to be in top 3 spots to get it. You can be anywhere on the first page of the results, second page, and it still appears. So even if you're lower down the page, some people will still want to explore that page, and when they see you, they don't often know even what that plugin is. So it gets them a little bit by a surprise, gets them to look.
Also, FYI, that is my neutral face, which I just try to look confused. So that's my poker face. That's me trying to be neutral right there. It's just kind of a furrowed brow, confused look.
And hopefully gets the client the click.
I see. And do you have any statistics?
Plus X% of a click-through rate. But we've definitely seen
higher on queries, how often it'll show up. Any statistics at all? Or any ideas on what queries it fires on, which is what I was trying to get out of them.
Oof, that would be very hard to get, I think. You would have
Not really.
to measure every single keyword that they have. No, there is no record of it. There's no way to track it because you cannot know that data.
I think Ahrefs does, I believe.
Only Google knows how often they will show it. Usually once it lands there, then for the specific keywords, it fires every single time. I haven't seen a case yet where I would search for client's keyword and it would show up and the next day it wouldn't. Usually once they start showing up, they just show all the time.
So once it starts showing up, then it shows up consistently?
Usually, yeah.
Okay. And tell me a little bit more about, so you're with OMG. Can you tell me a little bit more about OMG and the kind of SEO you guys do? Now, originally, poor Christian here was sent in because the guys who run OMG, which he's about to talk about, were supposed to be on my show. Maybe they knew what kind of dangerous scenario they were walking into, and so they sent poor Christian here. But I wanted to get more into OMG and get into what tactics they do. But he has an interesting answer. We'll see in a second.
To be honest with you, I am a little bit under an NDA, so I always try not to share too much, not to give away the secret sauce.
Oh, that's convenient.
Actually, recently I've been more exploring the brand values and how they focus, how we focus very well on delivering the value to the clients. And again, I don't.
Translation: it's not all about the rankings that we can't certify or in any way guarantee because we actually don't scientifically test them. So we'll choose other KPIs at random. The cry of the SEO. Other KPIs are important because I can't produce the ranking one.
I'm not going into specifics exactly. Hey, how much link building do we do, or how much do we focus on the on-page or the technical? I more try to
as if I cared about any of that, really. Again, poor Christian here was thrown to the wolves, or namely the wolf specifically. But of course, I'm more on this show and my viewership are more concerned about where do you get your information from and how did you acquire it? Because everyone can talk about everything to the end of time. It doesn't matter. If you haven't done any scientific experiments to get highly reliable knowledge, then this is all just self-masturbatory talk of SEO, of guessisms that mean nothing, right?
I try to talk about the brand. I try to talk in the sense of how do we want to focus on the client's values, delivering the client's satisfaction, and also focusing on always delivering them the facts and not some theories. So I always try to be, in any of my reports, be very specific about things and be an open book. Don't try to hide things from them.
Right, I see. So you try to provide clients with the facts and not theories.
Yeah, always test the stuff. I always try to deliver things in such a way where we say, look, if I'm gonna test something, then I will say openly, look, we haven't tried this yet with you. It worked in some other cases really great, but we'll see how it does. Are you happy for us to do this test, right? And usually the clients are happy, and when they see it this way, then I can show them very measurable things. Before this date, we didn't have the snippets, for example. After this date, we do have them.
I will admit that he's a nice guy. He's a good guy. I'm not putting him down in any way, shape, or form. I have complete respect for him as a human being. I think he's a nice guy. But that's kind of like the medical doctor who's supposed to know what the drug is going to do. Ask the patient, do you want to take this? In the saying, I have no idea what this drug's going to do to you. Do you want to try it? This is, or I tried it in two other cases, and that's the whole test base. Want to give it a go? I mean, obviously, if you're that far along that that's your best treatment, well, then science has failed you. But they haven't even tried science to begin with. Would be my gentle critique.
For this date, we didn't have additional questions and answers on the page. Now we do, and we can increase. We can see some increases there in positions, in impressions from Search Console.
Yes.
Often in visits as well.
How often do you guys try to install the snippets and it fails?
Have I had any? You know what? Maybe one. I would have to say very, very roughly. Maybe 1 out of 5 doesn't pick them up.
Okay, I'm sorry. They're just right there. I'm going to call bullshit. Again, Christian's a good guy, and I put his feet to the fire, so he had to come up with an answer. But he doesn't know. He hasn't tested it. He hasn't written it down. He's making a random guess. And you ever like how you ask SEOs how many times they fail in the SEO industry, and the answer is never. We've never failed. None of our clients have ever gotten a penalty. None of our clients have ever gotten a demotion. We've always succeeded on every SERP we've ever tried, and we've never had any problems. So we've never been hit by a Google update. None of that's happened. So I'm sorry that in that case, I'm gonna call bullshit on that one, and hope that he has some better information in the future.
1 out of 6. I've noticed on some e-commerce websites, for some reason, it's a lot harder to pick them up. On others, it worked like a charm. So on some of the number 1, number 2 spots, we've had the expanded listings, so some very, very competitive terms. And on some others, for some reason, it doesn't want to pick it up. But look, it's still early days. Google is still changing a lot with how they feature the search results pages, right? They try the favicons, they remove the favicons because people don't want to be misled. There's always something new with them, so I'm sure that they'll continue pursuing this path. I'm seeing that.
Yeah.
Go on.
People definitely don't want to be misled. That's for sure. So you would say, in your guess, maybe 1 out of 5 times, 1 out of 6 times. That's your theory.
Has a bit of complications.
How often they don't fire. But I thought we were going by facts, Christian. We were going by facts before, and now you're guessing. Oh no.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to go back to something you said earlier because I thought it was interesting. So you talked about, and I'm paraphrasing, and I'm sorry if I get it wrong. So please correct me if I get it wrong. You were talking about, you didn't want to talk about OMG's secret sauce. Okay, yes. Fair enough. Then you also talked about, and this is where please correct me if I'm wrong. I think you said that OMG was also more focused on other KPIs, to put it in my own language. There's other KPIs to track. Am I on the right track of what you were talking about there?
More or less, yes. But again, okay. It's look, this kind of business stuff I just can't discuss on a publicly on a podcast. This is the kind of stuff that we're very protective about. It's very much information in pitches, in presentations online. You know what I mean? It's a little bit awkward for me to go into the detail there too much. What I usually
of what KPI they track exactly, or do they track any KPIs? Can OMG do anything for anyone at all? Apparently not.
We prefer to discuss openly is where search engines are going, what kind of things I usually work with in terms of like technical content audits, the approach to strategy, but I wouldn't want to get deep into the KPIs thing. You see, it's very individual for each campaign. Of course, I can cover the basics.
Yes, blah blah. Livelihood, and it's both the money.
All those kind of changes. Right?
At the end of the day, it's the money for the business. Money is their livelihood, and it's both the money that you can help them bring in, but also the money that they have to spend out as well.
Of course.
Maybe getting SEO that's not as efficient because it's not powered by science. Just putting that out there for thought.
It's all about the value, right? It's all about the value. So with each client, I think very, very often it's about finding the unique KPIs that really work for them, right? You don't want to be working towards the rankings if they don't care about the rankings. They only care.
Okay, I'll say this right now. If your SEO can't guarantee improvements in some of the pages they're working on, maybe the occasional page, for sure, I will admit, doesn't seem to get stubborn and doesn't seem to want to move up on a monthly basis. Maybe it'll move up every 3 months or 4 months or 6 months. But if your SEO is not getting you improvements every single month, fire them because they don't know what they're talking about. Yes, I just said that. If your SEO is not showing ranking improvements on at least some of the pages they're working on every single month, fire them because that's what we can do. And so if they can't do it, then they don't know what they're talking about.
What to say is
we don't need to go to other KPIs as well because of the fact we can't make the rankings happen. Again, some pages are, more troublesome than others, and some require more work. Sometimes the client doesn't listen to you and doesn't want to fix this or that, but wants you to make magical results. But in general, if you're doing everything your SEO says, and if they can't show improvements on some of the pages they're working on every single month, fire them.
Equally, some people have some vanity keywords. They want to appear above their competitors. So I'm not gonna tell them, you know what, I'm not gonna do that for you.
The vanity keywords should even be easier, actually. But Christian is totally right, and he has the correct ethical answer here. I think kudos to Christian for this one. He's going to say, I'm not going to rank your vanity keywords because they're dumb keywords, client. You should be going for other keywords and not those keywords.
Because they only care about your sales. Well, no, if it's a marketing manager and they have a boss and that boss is fixated on 1 or 2 or 3 keywords, I get it. It's
right.
His business. He must get what he's buying. The customer's always right.
Right.
I may steer them. I'll steer them towards what I think would be a substantial strategy.
A much better keyword, maybe, that people are actually searching.
A set or better keywords.
Right,
so,
yes. Okay,
but look, it's all about, again, facts and transparency. If the keyword they're pursuing has 20 searches a month, and the keyword out to pursue has 2,000, after I explained, usually there is no argument after that.
Right. Yeah, okay.
But it's all done in a polite, positive way, right?
Okay, so you don't want to talk about OMGs, kind of processes, or even kind of what they do or what they promise. None of those things you want to talk about.
Well, it's very unique. It's very unique for each client. You see what I mean? So I would be maybe overselling and over promoting certain qualities that we have and underselling others. What I find most interesting is the number of how the search landscape is changing. It will be more and more difficult with time, and how Google is pushing continuous updates to challenge every brand. And also,
really, tell us more.
The continued pushing of the biggest brands that there is, and how it is more and more difficult for the smaller businesses or medium-sized businesses to avoid using any kind of shady tactics and still make it in search. Right?
Shady tactics. Sure. What would you classify as a shady tactic?
Well, I'm seeing some people certainly trying to rank on the old school PBNs and trying to build out multiple tiers of backlinks and purchasing backlinks from dodgy websites and doing
more SEO. You mean they don't understand scientifically what's going on any more than anybody else?
Hidden quantities that are a bit alarming, because me myself, I try to stay away from this stuff as much as possible whenever it's possible, and I wouldn't build a strategy for a client on some really low quality backlinks that I myself know that Google will have to penalize within a year's time. I know that Google continued chase. It's a little bit like a Wild West, It's almost like there's two groups of SEOs. There's the sheriff SEO with the
yes, we know all about black hats and white hats.
And yet, on some keywords, I occasionally find, especially with the latest update, the core January update, the latest February update, the smaller one, I've seen some people come back from the second or third page that I knew were doing really dodgy stuff, back to the first page. So I'm definitely seeing that Google is trying.
But they had link penalties.
It seems like they're loosening the censorship, if to say, on the backlinks and their quality. It seems like they're allowing more low quality backlinks in the mix. And I don't think that's a very good decision.
Now, this is my face thinking, okay, what? I don't want to be, I don't want to be jerk level 7. I'm usually on jerk level 4. I don't want to go to jerk level 7 and just be like, okay, listen, buddy, you have no idea if there's actually such a thing as a link penalty, and you don't know if those pages have link penalties, and you don't know if it was a link penalty or not, or something else that brought them back. This is all just innuendo and myth of the SEO industry.
They're obviously they're right because it's their search engine. But for me, it's a bit worrying when some people that are maybe using the proper strategies are not being rewarded for it.
And what are the proper strategies exactly? Who defines those? How do you prove those? Science does, not Google.
I'm seeing some people that are doing amazing SEO being outranked by some spammers occasionally. So those Google updates.
Yes. So go ahead, have a sip there. I'm a little confused, so maybe you can help me. So in one instance, I hear you saying that and you also talked about earlier about how you like to have facts for the clients, not theories.
Of course.
you know that some links are going to get a site penalized, quote unquote. And but you just said, so I'm a little confused, but you just also said you think maybe, as a theory, that maybe Google is letting some pages back to page one that you had speculated might have gotten some kind of link penalty previously. You can't handle the truth. It's like I'm like the lawyer. I'm trapping him now with my logic. So which one is it? Do you know for a fact that these links are bad? And if you do, how exactly do you know? Or is it more of a guess?
Without a doubt. No, when you look when you compare two backlink profiles, you see that one company has
folks, public service announcement. That's not knowledge. Looking at backlink profiles and making guesses, however educated, as to what may or may not be causing ranking fluctuations on real sites is not knowledge. That's not what knowledge is. Knowledge has a much stricter requirement of reducing variables, which we'll talk about in the end.
Genuine links from
blah blah blah,
or online casino websites. So who's gonna catch up to all this? And now years later, they're driving around in Lamborghinis and chilling on jet skis, and I'm just still working in SEO,
So I cut off part of what he says. He said he's being white hat SEO for some time, and he watches the black hat spammers do the nasty black hat, and he thinks Google's going to get them. But then, as he says, 5 years later, they're driving jet skis and Porsches and Lamborghinis, and he's still doing SEO. So take what you will from this joke. I hear what you're saying. Yes. Yeah.
It's a never-ending struggle, your ethics.
But really, the never-ending struggle really should be in your knowledge and where it comes from. People who have knowledge is power, as Bacon said, to use the quote. And people who have the better knowledge from science are the ones who are going to win in the end. It is a struggle with ethics, that's for sure. And what I was saying there, a struggle with ethics is that, and it's a struggle with ethics of you're responsible now for your client's budget with knowledge that comes from a Cracker Jack box. That's to say it's not knowledge. Now, again, Christian's a better guy. We're going to talk about that in the end, and he's not as bad as some of these SEOs I'm talking about. But some of them really, as we're going to talk about in this conversation, have been doing SEO for 1 or 2 years and call themselves an expert. Like Chase Reiner, cough. So, how much could they possibly know, even from the SEO perspective, never mind from doing any stringent scientific testing? Would you classify yourself more as strictly a white hat? Like you're never buying links, or you're only buying links sometimes? Or he goes on to admit that sometimes he buys links. So I don't care whether he's a black hat or not.
I remember 7-8 years ago we used to do it in other business. And I remember a company in UK almost went bust because they were buying the links only.
And that's the danger of following, the tactics that Google knows about. You should be trying to do SEO on the tactics that Google doesn't know about. And they know all about links and all about tiered link building and all about PBNs. And if you did the scientific testing, if one does the scientific testing, they realize that links are actually not that important of an algorithm anyway.
From this company, only those because everyone else was spamming. But I was always cautious that it will happen. And, nowadays, one of my USPs is to say that, that the client sees every backlink that's being made for them through PR or through any kind of outreach, through any kind of placement. They need to see all of them, right? To have the full transparency. It's almost like sharing the responsibility. Like I would never want to be in a situation again when the client looks at the backlinks and they say, "What the hell is this?" I want to be like, "Look, here is the stuff." And also, look, nowadays Google.
So you see my face. I'm like, what am I going to say about this? That's also, again, this is the idea that it's okay to be a SEO if you go to the client and say, hey, I'm going to build these links. Are you okay with that? Because I don't know what they're going to do to you, as opposed to, and therefore, if you agree, well, then I'm not culpable anymore. As opposed to being like, no, I'm a doctor and I know what pills I'm going to prescribe to you, and I'm not going to ask for or even listen to any suggestions on your behalf as to what you should be taking that you read on the internet. And no, you're going to be taking these antibiotics because you're sick and you're also contagious for everybody else. And that's what you're going to be doing. Because I know, because I have the science behind me. That's the difference. And that's what you need from a business consultant, is someone who knows from a scientific perspective, in my opinion.
Google is pushing more and more of the on-site SEO as well. So they are, I am noticing that you can really build up a good authority and you don't always have to rely on the backlinks. You can do a lot with the content. Sadly enough, at the same time, the newspapers don't want to give any links anymore that are no follow. And it's been for years now, right? The blogs don't want to give you any links. Even when we have some cosmetics clients, I was trying to do a little bit of incentivized outreach, talk to a few bloggers, even the micro influencers, and tell them, look, you will get those cosmetics for free. And I'm not even asking for you to write up some false words about them. Just say how you feel about them. If you don't like them, write you don't like them. It's not, I'm not trying to bribe anyone. I'm just trying to get the brand out there. You couldn't do any more white hat PR approach than this. And very often they ask for money, man. They ask for a big, sometimes quite big sums, even the smaller influencers. So the internet got very commercialized now, right?
So if heaven forbid the internet commercialized, yes, it has. And so even the SEOs are noticing as well, of course. If you don't think links are that much of a factor anymore, then why is the linking community charging, in many cases, exorbitant amounts of money for a link?
Bigger money, actually. It seems like every year the links are costing more.
And they are. This is true.
I'm occasionally checking on the competitors that run, competitors of mine, colleagues, we can call them, who run businesses selling links, and they are making some real money. Because links are harder and harder to come by, especially do follows inside of an editorial. And look, in some industries with some clients, I'm blessed enough.
Boy, if you've done some scientific testing, you might know that there's other kinds of links that maybe have value as well. If you're done a certain way, they don't have to be do follow or in editorials. Maybe that could save you some money. I don't know. I'm just saying scientific testing, in isolated conditions, just per chance.
That some of the clients have very good backlink profiles. They have aged domains. They're not new to the market. They're established.
Sorry, but why do you think so you think the prices are increasing because there's less people selling?
I think there is generally speaking, there is more demand. Maybe there is more desperation a little bit,
There we go. That's the reason. More, and Christian is entirely correct. More desperation, because no one knows what the ranking factors are. And so people are just clinging on to links, which we'll talk about later. And then so people will charge more for it. And it's complete smokescreen, complete selling crushed up rhinoceros horn to treat your male enhancement issues that has no science whatsoever in the background and hurts people in the process.
Maybe there's some people there that, generally speaking, if you can't get links from the news websites, the PR releases the press releases are almost useless. The broken link building has been done for so many years that there's no more broken links to be fixed there with getting backlinks from them. No one wants to accept guest posts for free.
And he's right. Links are a diminishing return as well.
Discussions of seasoned SEOs in closed circles. That's where often some good things come in.
Sure. Can you recommend it?
Do very closed and very secret Facebook groups.
Sorry, I ask him where he gets his SEO information. Secret sauce, so that's fine. But I hope you don't mind answering questions about your own personal SEO theories. And I will ambush you, Christian, you poor young man, and skewer your ideas. Where do you come by your SEO information? Where do you learn about SEO?
The first thing really is the few very closed and very secret Facebook groups. I always find that the information that's available publicly is like a certain quality, but the actual discussions of seasoned SEOs in closed circles, that's where often some good things come in.
And Christian is totally right. Free SEO groups, the information that comes out of free SEO groups is complete and utter crap. It's not anywhere near good enough for you to run a business off of. You need to be in some paid group to get the real information of people who are doing the real scientific testing of course, I will go on in the show here to talk about what that actually means versus what it doesn't mean. Sure. Can you recommend any groups?
I can't recommend the private closed ones.
I can recommend mine. You can try to apply to mine. I don't accept everybody, but you could try.
But there is a really good new group actually that a friend of mine from Glasgow has launched. It's called the SEO Inside.
Yeah, blah blah blah.
Google, right?
I would hope so. I would hope that if you're not clever enough to find simple information in Google, maybe you're not clever enough to do SEO and to try to combat the smartest programmers in the world with multiple PhDs, maybe. just throwing it out there as something to consider. Okay, and so let me ask you, these private Facebook groups, where do they get their SEO information from?
Well, you got experts there that do their own tests, right? So I always try to also.
Oh, tests, I say. Okay, well, maybe this conversation will take a different direction. Good.
So try to contribute from time to time. You often have discussions of people's experiences. So, for example, I think the toughest place to get information from is if you're working in-house as an SEO on just one website. Like that's really difficult because all you see is your market, your own website. Once you're a freelancer, you work in an agency, you touch so many websites over the years. You see the bigger trends in different markets. You know some of those websites inside out. So when the algorithm changes, penalizes on some of the keywords or boosts other keywords, you know those pages. Like you know why it's happening.
Yes, I love those SEOs who work for one giant company that has millions of dollars to spend for marketing per month, and they keep ranking month after month. Like, it's easy, guys.
It's easy.
Yeah,
if you're the top
it's because you
player
work
in
for
your market.
Walmart. You work for a major brand. They were ranking page 1 before you got there, and they'll be ranking page 1 long after you're gone.
Exactly.
Unless they screw up entirely, do something totally wrong, like delete half their index or something like that. And these are the guys who usually present at SMX as the experts, because they've never got a demotion because they rank for Walmart, and Walmart's never going to get a demotion. Therefore, they're an expert.
You leave the robots.txt file there on disallowing everything or robots meta tag, right?
Exactly, or something along those lines.
Which it happened. I mean, I'm sure it happened to everyone once in their career. Upon launching of the new website, they forgot to check, right?
It's never happened to me.
I'm sure it happens once or twice. But so what I find really, look, there are good blog posts there. There are some good bloggers out there. Twitter is still fairly good, but on Twitter you have to do a lot of filtering. I find there's
speaking of that filtering, so how do you filter the BS from the good SEO information?
Oof. Usually by who's spreading it, to be honest. That's the first entry. If I see someone I don't know and I never heard of, I likely take it with a lot more of a pinch of salt. When I see someone that has always proven reliable information, then I'm definitely in there, behind them. Like I'll be checking what they're saying. I'll be comparing it to my own data. If
you were to ask Aristotle, who wrote the Rhetoric, he would say this is the appeal to authority, a logical fallacy. Just because an authority said something great last time doesn't mean what they say is necessarily true. However, practically that's a good rule of thumb. But at the end of the day, of course, the final arbiter of truth is science. To determine whether there's any science behind it. As someone who's never said anything before in the SEO industry, if they have the science to back it up, they have the science to back it up. And that's what our arbiter of truth should be. That is, if you wish to be employed in it for very much longer. Okay.
That's what I always try to do.
Right. Okay, sure. So I want to come clean a little bit. I don't know if the guy who signed you up for this did his research, but my show is strictly based on SEO science. All of our information comes from SEO scientific testing. All of our theories come from scientific SEO testing. We don't listen to anybody in the industry. I think he knows with that look on his face. I think he did a quick little Google search on me, even though the VA who signed him up for this suicide mission did not. The poor guy. We don't read any other groups. We don't listen to Google. We treat the algorithm as a black box of nature, and we simply subject it to empirical experiment. We hypothesize. We construct experiments that will affirm or deny the specific hypothesis. And we test. We'll do 8 hypotheses in a single test, and we'll build a granulified theory of ranking out of that. And we've been very successful in doing so, but it's been rather controversial in the industry, actually. And that's what I was talking about earlier, in that a lot of people who are merely guessing in the industry, which we call guessios, don't like us talking about scientific testing, mainly because they're not doing it. That's really the reason why, quite frankly. And they realize how bad it makes them look. Because at the end of the day, and I'm sure you would agree, given that you mentioned that you're into SEO testing as well and providing clients facts and not theories. Although, I mean, there's only so much we can provide facts. Even I will hold my hand up and say, there's only so much testing you can do, and there's some things that are not that important. So, for the speed, for this, well, that's not true. I've tested that as well. What's an algorithm? I haven't really tested much because I don't really care. All the important ones I have, so I can't really think of one off the top of my head. But I'm sure there's some question where they're like, Josh, should I put my author bio at the bottom of the article or not? I haven't specifically tested that, so I will make my educated guess. But even those educated guesses, there's like a doctor from the 20th century making educated guesses based on all the empirical science versus, you mentioned a cowboy town, versus a doctor out of Deadwood, in the HBO series, making educated guesses as to what part of the brain this bullet went through in someone's head.
Of course.
When medicine knows this much as compared to medicine knowing that much from science, right? So I'm making guesses off of this, whereas the rest of the industry is making guesses usually off of this. And so, as I'm sure you would agree, the quality of the guesses of the scientist, the SEO scientist, I'll take myself out of the equation. The guesses of the SEO scientist are going to be much better than even the guesses than the people who are guessing on just what John Mueller said, some cryptic answer that he's probably lying or half lying.
We started on the amount of articles that have been written from one sentence that he said, right?
Yes, indeed. Well, and that's why I was kind of asking you about the link industry. It really is. I'm going to float a theory out there, and you can agree or disagree, but it really seems to me that it really is fear mongering. It really is just smoke screens and public relations that Google puts out there, and the industry tries to make money on it by rehashing the same fear mongering, and then the link builders will sell on the fear mongering, saying everyone's terrified, they don't know what the ranking factors are anymore, and they're clinging on to links desperately because they used to be, and maybe still partly are a factor.
Still work, of course.
But so that's the only thing people will cling on to, and they have all the mechanisms in place to sell them. So why rebuild a business? Just keep selling links and ramp up the prices, right? Just like the oil barons are doing now. Just keep selling oil, even though we know it's destroying the planet, and that industry is done.
We know the solar energy is coming. We know the electric is the next thing, but we still got this oil to sell, right?
They have more. I can't remember where I read this, but they have more barrels of oil sitting on the planet they've ever had. They have more than they could ever sell, but they keep fracking and they keep mining for more oil, while this industry, which is dead, still keeps making as much money as possible before they need to get out, before Greta Thunberg goes and kills them with an axe or something. But
she is a bit vicious.
Please, no photoshopping of me on Greta Thunberg's body or vice versa with an axe. But good for her, because she's trying to spread the truth. So I want to ask you about this testing then. So these Facebook groups that you're going to, what kind of testing are they doing? What kind of stringent methods for controls are they doing? Is it proper scientific testing? So that's the question, right? So everybody in the industry, so this is very interesting. Everybody in the industry is moving towards scientific testing because at the end of the day, you can't avoid science. Everyone knows science wins. That's just the way it is. You cannot beat the empirical method. It has brought us all the conveniences and technology that we have today and all the knowledge we have today, if from that practical standpoint, that point of view, from engineering, from medicine, from political science, everything, psychology, everything. So you can't avoid it or deny it. And so even all the well-meaning guessios like Christian here, he's a good guy. Don't get me wrong. He's a good guy. And he knows that scientific testing is the thing you need to do. But here's the problem, is that there is a night and day difference between saying you do scientific testing, quote unquote, like other people, like Chase Reiner does. He says he does scientific testing. No, he doesn't. But I think he's flat out lying. But even if you do testing, it doesn't make it scientific. There are certain controls that are required to make it the knowledge as trustable as possible, and that's what science tries to get at, is isolating the variables. And this is the conversation where we're going to go. This will be more interesting, of trying to make the conversation, trying to make the variables as isolated as possible, so that the knowledge is as trustworthy as possible. And that's the difference between what the rest of the industry thinks they have done, thought they have done, and what they really haven't done and need to do if they're going to exist much longer. So that's what we're going to start talking about now. What can you speak to that?
I wouldn't say it's very how scientific is it, but how scientific can any SEO test be?
So, and here he comes up with the perfect response. You see my face. Here he comes up with the perfect response, the retort of the SEO, saying, well, how scientific could the testing be? There's no way to isolate the variables. One, they don't know that. They don't know that's not a priori true. That's not a mathematical truth. You'd have to go and try in the world to see if you can isolate the variables. And how many times have they actually gone and tried? They haven't. They don't even know what the variables are to isolate. They haven't even written down a list and saying, okay, you could isolate HTML from CSS, but you can't isolate HTML from speed. And they haven't even written it down, right? So that's the first thing you have SEOs saying is that, well, you can't do scientific testing, and then why not? Well, then you finally boil it down to isolating the variables. They say, well, you can't isolate the variables. Bullshit, we can't. We do all the time. It's just that's a lack of creativity or imagination on their part. And quite frankly, for the well-meaning ones like Christian here, who I think is a good guy and I think would do the proper science and would do his due diligence, I think if he had the time and the wherewithal, and maybe now that I've opened him up to it, hopefully he's not too angry that I kind of ambushed him in this video. That was not my intention. To ambush or make anyone feel bad, but it is my intention to kind of show what problems the industry have right now. And sadly, I think Christian has some problems in his SEO approach. I still think he's a great guy, a good human being. I think he's much better than most of the SEOs out there who are in the other category, like Chase Reiner, who are just really slick, kind of used car salesmen, who even if they had the time, they still wouldn't do, and the wherewithal and the intelligence and the diligence to do scientific testing. They still wouldn't, just because they don't want to, or because it's hard, or because they don't think it needs to be done, or they have a problem in their brain that they don't understand how scientific knowledge is superior to, say, like random guessing. Because of the controls you put into science, they just don't understand that. And I'm sorry if you don't understand that, you have a problem in your brain. That's just the way it is. So let's see what else Christian says. So that's the counter argument to his going here and saying that how isolated could they be, and then we'll go on and talk about it more. And I'll talk about some of the actual controls you can do. What can you speak to that?
I wouldn't say it's very how scientific is it, but how scientific can any SEO test be? There's only as much as we can edit, and there's only as many factors we can really compress and really track. The way I see it very often, it's comparing hunches, then comparing those hunches versus other people's hunches. And then,
well, of course, all science starts on hunches. You have a hunch that maybe E equals MC squared. You have a hunch that, that maybe there's something deeper than molecules, maybe there's atoms. You have a hunch that maybe there's something deeper than atoms, maybe there's the subatomic level. You have a hunch that the Higgs boson maybe has a weight of this or has a properties of that, and you test it. But you have to do the testing. You can't just say, oh, well, I have a hunch. If you can do the testing, if there's an ability to do the testing, and there is, you have to do the testing. Otherwise, you still don't have any knowledge. So that's fine. It doesn't matter that it's best guesswork, but it's best guesswork like on steroids in science, as opposed to honest best guesswork, as opposed to you think the best is watching TV for 10 hours a day and then rambling off an opinion about SEO. Well, that's obviously qualitatively the answer of the SEO who's not doing any isolated variable scientific testing, and the quality of the guessing of the SEO who is going to be radically different, so different in degree that it becomes different in kind.
And it's actually making changes on pages and then sharing what the results was. But at the same time, I'm also aware that I was doing some tests in the middle of January. We had a client relaunch a whole section of their website.
So here's the second critique that SEO scientists get from SEOs that Christian is very intelligently and dutifully going to bring up organically here.
With new content, and then the Google update here. Sometimes with SEO tests, as I'm sure you know, it's impossible to separate yourself from the algo change. If you're doing the change on the same day and launching it, that algo hits. It's just unfortunate because they don't announce them. Most of the time they don't. So, we try our best.
That specific scientific problem, you did a test on the 18th, let's say, and the 18th is the exact day that Barry Schwartz says that Danny Sullivan told him that they released some algorithm update. Do you say that makes it impossible to judge the results of your test, or do you say that that adds in
makes it a bit harder.
some percentage of uncertainty into the result? And he's right. And this is why I think Christian's one of the good ones, because he realized there that it doesn't make it impossible. You don't know enough to say that it's impossible, right? Impossible is a very strong claim, but it does make it harder, and I fully agree with him there.
A big percentage. It depends on the type of a change. If you're just launching a few pages or one section of the actual website, a small section, then it's easy to see that, right? What was the average change on the other pages, or per page changing the ranking positions or impressions it's getting? What kind of queries was it showing for? What kind of queries is it showing for now after the change? If you can single it out like that, then yes, you can go a little bit closer. If you rolled out a bigger change across the website, let's say some changes for the speed of the website across the whole site, then that percentage of uncertainty is pretty big, right?
Right, it definitely can be.
And also when I see the biggest thing is really the seeing. I don't trust them when they say they'll release an update, and I don't trust them when they say they didn't release an update. Because very often they say, no, we didn't do anything. And every single client, I can see a big jump. And across the competitors, I can see a big jump. That's not a coincidence. No. Very often they do spread misinformation. I do have to agree with that. But
who, Google? No, they don't spread any misinformation. No.
Do no evil.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, don't be evil. Yeah. No, I would of course agree. My viewership would agree wholeheartedly as well. Like I said, we don't listen to a word they say. If they say they did a core update, fine. Like we'll partly listen to it and keep that in mind in case we did a test on that exact day. But quite frankly, our testing has gotten so precise that depending on what part they're updating of the core algorithm, we can see it in the semantic engine, for example, but not see it in the quality engine. Or we can see it in the quality engine, but we don't see it in the semantic engine because we're now discriminate enough where we can tell the differences between the two. In fact, we can break it down into the two components of the semantic engine, as opposed to the scoring engine versus the weight engine, versus which is all part of BERT and RankBrain, versus the quality engine, which is more Panda. Well, I still call it Panda. I don't know if they still call it Panda. I do.
Well, look, they've put it in as Panda, and that was one of the big breakthroughs. So I don't think there's anything wrong with calling it Panda. Let's call
right
it
in 2011. Yes.
So,
so we can.
What are you seeing with BERT then? So you've managed to single out some changes there, the semantic changes, and how that language processing. How do you do that?
That's a good segue because that was my exact next question for you. These Facebook groups that you see doing testing, that's the question, right? How do you isolate the variables? Because the testing you were talking about previously is field testing. So that's having actual production web pages that have real production content on it, ranking in a website that has any number of things going on with it, in a web that has any number of things going on with it, with traffic that has any number of things going on with it, with a search engine, as you talked about, is doing numerous changes per day that they don't tell us about. It's all about isolating the variables. That's how you be more scientific as an adjective, right? The more variables you can isolate, the more precise, more epistemically trustable, the more precise, the more trustable your inferences about what happened with the test can be. So we have found ways to isolate the variables, even to the point where we isolate it too much. We can't make any difference. We've gone past the Google atom to something deeper that they don't even measure. So like, oh, that's too far. Then you go back and you're like, oh, okay. So this is where we're running into my secret sauce, where I can't talk about how we've isolated the variables.
Of course.
But trust me, there are various ways. The most popular ways that other groups have done, of course, are making gibberish pages, usually in English or fake English words.
Sure. And
putting
check the
them
ranking for the fake words that they made.
Right. Yeah. Put that on a domain that has nothing going on, no traffic, no links, no ranking. It's a brand new domain. Isolate them in a folder, things like that. They're made of gibberish. Make one little change. The pages are 100% duplicated, except for one little change. And it doesn't have to be on-page changes as well. You can test virtually any virtually, I would argue that any variable that Google can use as a ranking algorithm, except for the ones that they control in their database, even some of those you can test for, as long as you have an environment where that's the only difference between the testing environment and otherwise. And
Sure,
from
but
doing that,
it cannot be the only difference though.
sorry,
Well, you'll always have things like the location of the website, um, maybe a slightly better domain, maybe domain purchased in a different place. The algorithm itself may still change, even though the website has no traffic and no competitors to speak of.
mm-hmm.
You're still like you if you're doing this kind of testing, you're still within the same environment. You can't escape.
So that's a very interesting critique. It's like saying, well, the air that the rats in your lab was breathing is different from today from yesterday, even though it's filtered, HEPA filtered, and there's no pathogens in it, or there shouldn't be. It's just, but it is different molecules. Yeah, you're feeding them different molecules of food from one day to the next. Therefore, all of your medical testing you've done these rats is invalidated. No, that's not what that means. That's too far on the other end of doubt. But at the end of the day, I don't know that it is a factor, and the one who critiques doesn't know whether that's a factor or not. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Maybe a pathogen did sneak into a little COVID-19 did sneak into the past the HEPA filter and got and polluted the batch of rats on the second day. But it's the next thing that we're going to talk about. It doesn't matter because it's the next thing, but you can't. It doesn't matter because the next thing we're going to talk about is going to invalidate that critique, and it's going to preserve the sanctity of the trustworthiness of the results that you're getting from the scientific testing. But you can't at that point say, well, you never know what factors could be affecting your experiment, therefore all of science is invalid. That argument doesn't fly. Show me the experiment where that happened. You can't because all experiments are invalid. So, because you never know what you might have made a mistake. You never know what factors could be involved. That's not how thinking works. And this next factor this next factor we talk about in scientific testing is going to be the one that solves it for you.
That environment unless you would have your own emulator that has the Google algorithm from a certain date, right?
Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, we do 2 of them.
Amazing.
But we don't even have to use them because it's not I have, but I've tested them cross-compared. But it's actually not even that complicated. To answer those questions, usually the testing is done on the same domain. You usually don't test different domains unless that's part of the test, right? And Google's algorithms, once you learn how to filter out the noise, you find it's actually rather simple, and it's actually much easier than you thought. And Google is nowhere near the AI brilliance that you thought it was at. Yeah,
that's what they're always peddling. That's what they're always saying, right? Whenever you meet them, they're saying we will have. Oh, sorry, we're exploring cross-device tracking now, and then you meet them the next year, and they're saying we're very close to perfect cross-device tracking. Then you meet them the next year, and I say cross-device tracking, it's almost there. And then the next year they switch to something completely else because they gave up on cross-domain tracking, right? cross-device tracking.
Right. Yes.
Turns out it's actually impossible.
It's interesting how they're usually honest with that, but they're not honest with the other stuff, So it's an art. It's also an art trying to tell when Google's telling the truth or not. But no, there are many ways to isolate the variables. So I'm taking it in these Facebook groups you're on. Sadly, they're not isolating the variables very stringently, or I'm not at all surprised. They're all field tests.
I wouldn't so. I would say that the field tests are the current preferred method. That's the thing that I most common work with.
Right. Well, field tests are better than nothing. I'll give them some credit.
They're better than no tests.
Field tests are better than no tests. Sadly, it's such a 40,000 foot view. It's very hard to tell the pieces of that island off of Spain versus that island off of Portugal. It's very hard to tell the difference, right? But and then that, of course, is going to lead down the road to statistically greater and greater error moving forward. The other factor, however, that will help that condition, which I'm sure you would agree, and what we've implemented in our program is repetition. So this is a concept of competing scientific communities being able to retest a test, or the same scientific community could just repeat tests repeatedly. try to make it fail and see where the differences are. Do any of your groups do any repetition to ensure? And that also factors out, maybe there was an update. I have a fly flying around. It's making me crazy. That also factors out. It's a sneaky Google drone that's spying on me. When there's potential updates from Google, right? They're not making updates to that algorithm every day, or across 8 weeks, across 2 months.
No, they shake it for a week or 2 weeks sometimes, right? But usually it's pretty prompt. It's pretty quick usually.
I agree. Except for where they might be refreshing something, a month later, or some kind of database they refresh.
I love those ones. That's the best ones. When you've just put some new changes on, you're thinking, "Oh, I'm doing great with this new change."
Yes, and they decide to refresh the database and get new information or something. But so, what kind of repetition are these Facebook groups doing? None, of course. Does anyone test someone else's test, or do they retest week after week in the exact same environment?
No, I wouldn't say you retest week after week. I do try to.
Of course, they're not doing any repetitive testing, either one testing group unto itself, or cross one group testing the other group's results. So that's the sad thing, of course. The other thing that we missed entirely in the conversation was the fluidity of the results. Google's results are fluid. Do a search and then hit enter, and you see how the searches change sometimes, or you see how they change on a daily basis or from different places. Of course, if you're not doing stringent testing, you're not even going to notice the multivariable indexes. You're not even going to notice the sort to QDD shuffling that's going on. And that's not even part of the testing rubric that we talked about, which also has to be added in, that it's even worse than nature. Well, nature is kind of this way. When quantum physics kind of has the same problem. When you shoot a photon at an electron to try and see its position, you're changing its position, or you're changing by viewing the test, you're changing the test. We kind of have the same problem in SEO as well, except that the angels and gods are trying to make nature change, so we can't figure it out. I don't think that's happening for the physicists. I hope not, anyway. But
allow the test on different clients and see if they definitely check out. And that's exactly how it started with FAQ schema. When I noticed my competitors are doing it, I was gonna say, okay, how.
So that is a level of confirmation for sure, of repetition. It's one level. It's the last level. It's the after you've done years and years of testing your anti-cancer drug in closed variable, single variable environments or reduced variable environments, then you release it to the public. It's a little, sometimes it can be a little bit irresponsible to do that sooner, but it's definitely one part of it.
Can I do it for everyone? Can I do it for every single page? Does it work every time? And then it did. So very, very often it's just about that. But many of those changes, one of the more interesting ones was moving clients to CDNs and actually saying, what kind of a difference does a CDN do? Does it do a difference on every single client? Does every CDN work, or is there just the Cloudflare?
Exactly. So that's where you need to test the actual single variable components of what goes into using a CDN. What exactly is a CDN? It's a content distribution network. What does that mean? It means your content is being served up on servers around the world, ostensibly, presumably, so that it's ostensibly and presumably closer, internet-wise, to people who are trying to ask for the content. And so what's that going to do for you? Oh, well, that just gets to speed. So actually, when you're testing CDNs, what you're probably really testing is speed, or it would be almost impossible to isolate whether serving it from a different IP address makes a difference. Then actually, it's not at all. Actually, now that I think about it, serving it from a different IP address is better or worse than serving it at a different speed is better or worse. But at the very least, you need to A, understand these basic principles, boil it down, B, boil it down to these basic principles, and then C, test the individual principles. You could test, okay, I've got IP1 and IP2, do the test, no difference, no surprise. I got speed configuration 1, speed configuration 2, do the test, ooh, big difference, no surprise. Google already said that speed is a ranking factor. And if you scientifically test, you know exactly what about speed is a ranking factor, and then you can proceed thereby.
One stage Cloudflare was really being favored. And I've heard a lot of people, and the one thing that you're testing right now, next week Google can just change. They can just decide that thing isn't important to us.
So here,
Maybe it's to do field testing, but you want to get those things up there and quickly to get the benefit while they're still working, rather than continue testing without actually field testing and getting the benefit from them. Because the one thing that you're testing right now, next week Google can just change. They can just
and that's definitely possible, but I comment on it here.
decide that thing isn't important to us.
Right. Yeah. Definitely, there is a time to action for sure. However, the benefit of doing the single variable testing is that you're getting such far down into the principles of how Google search works. There's a lot of stuff there that they can. If you have a proper program of single variable testing, just cranking out single variable tests based on the euphemisms and theories of other SEO groups is not going to get you into the principles of Google's rankings. You need to do you need to use Occam's razor as well, of course, not having competing theories that cover the same thing. You need to test competing theories against your theories to come up with the correct theories as to how things are going on. And you need to do the testing in such a way where you're trying to get a grand unified theory of testing. There's lots of SEO groups out there that do field testing. There's one or two that do single variable testing. There's none except for mine that are doing the single variable testing in a robust scientific way to come up with the grand unified theory of ranking to try and understand it on the principal levels of what Google has created. They'll test whether keyword density is a ranking factor or not, but they're covering so many other vaguisms in there. They never tested whether they should even be using the word keyword density and what that comes down to, what are all the basic principles that come down to that and what they could be testing there, for example. It's the exact same problem as testing whether CDNs help your ranking. That's not something you can test because there's actually 8 things, for example, there's 8 things involved in a CDN. You need to test each single one, and that's sadly usually what is not happening. So you don't get the grand unified theory of ranking. You have some factoids which are vaguely true, but they're not true enough to provide enough of a ranking boost because you don't actually know what in your serum makes you a super monster. You have a serum with fluid A, B, and C. You don't know if it's A. You don't know if it's B. You don't know if it's C that makes you a super monster. You don't know if it's just B and C and A is hurting, or A and B and C is hurting, or A and C and B is in the way. If you were able to isolate these variables out, then you'd know which part of A, B, and C or which combination is actually going to provide the result you need, and you're going to be that much more efficient. You're going to have save that much more money. You're going to have that much more ranking power. And that's what a grand unified theory, a scientific program that tries to refute itself and to boil things down, and not only for one particular area, but for all the areas and provide an E equals MC squared of how the ranking works. That's what you need to do with your scientific program. And no other program is doing that except for, as far as I know, except for mine. Can't change. It's the base of their engine. I've discovered
the core.
Yeah, I've discovered the semantic engine, the quality engine, and how they talk to each other. They can make changes to it, but they can't get rid of it. At least not without deleting the entire paradigm.
Without starting from the scratch.
Rewriting the entire algorithm, which they've done, right? Amit Singhal came in and rewrote the entire algorithm in, I think it was 2001. Then they rewrote the entire algorithm again with Hummingbird in June 2013. Then they rewrote the algorithm again with RankBrain, which was at 2015. I can't remember exactly when that came out. Now, RankBrain wasn't a complete rewrite. They're still using Hummingbird for some behind-the-scenes database retrieval, I do believe. 16 or something like that. So it's RankBrain now that I'm really, RankBrain and BERT and their quality engine Panda that I'm really tracing the guts of at the moment. That ostensibly, knock on wood, it's not going to change so fast or so quickly. Yeah, so it's interesting that some groups are doing scientific testing or trying to do scientific testing, but you know there's a difference between curiosity testing and robust scientific testing. And I think you nailed it on the head what the difference is. And the difference is time. This is my full-time job. This takes me all day, every day, right, to do this kind of a program and to come up with the kind of results I've come up with, that our group's been able to come up with. So I totally understand why nobody else does it, because that's all you would do, right? If you want to do it right. So yeah, I understand that. Well, we're getting close to an hour. It's been 46 minutes or so. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about? Any questions you have for me? Anything you
I
want to
would
talk
ask you.
about? What you guys do?
Would you say it's gotten more complicated after the bird update, or would you say it's gotten a little bit easier after the bird update?
As far as my testing went, the bird update is a nothing burger. It's doing some bidirectional blah 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 blah. It's doing some bidirectional changes as to the weight of the keywords.
Mm-hmm.
So when
Sure.
they search for best mattress toppers, traditionally the emphasis would be put on the keyword best because it's first in the sentence. Traditionally, that's how Google's always been since the beginning. All BERT does is realize that no, actually they want mattress toppers. I'm not going to give you a whole bunch of pages with the word best in them or something along those lines. It's actually not how it works at all.
Almost ignore the word best in some cases,
Right.
right?
And at the end
Because
of the
I
day,
know
they
to
just
use
want
mattress
they want
toppers.
quality mattress toppers, and our algorithms are supposedly choosing the highest quality pages anyway. So any pages about mattress toppers should suffice. And so then they put up the mattress toppers pages. So BERT is kind of a nothing burger, but it's a kind of a good example when you scientifically test it in an isolated environment. But it's kind of a good example again of how the SEO industry, going off guesses, going off theories, going off fear mongering, thought that this was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe also because Google likes to layer updates. So they'll tell you they're doing a core update, but they also updated this and this and this at the same time. That if you've been paying very close attention to the testing.
But you're only looking at the layer, so you never notice the other ones, of
Right,
course.
right. And so you think BERT has to do with, I don't know, links per se, but it really doesn't. But they also filtered
Of course.
other things in there at the same time. So
Did you notice that they use a lot more synonyms now, or they tolerate a lot more synonyms? So it seems to me that in the past, if you were targeting your keyword, you were targeting that keyword. Nowadays, a consultant is the same as a freelancer, or a service is similar to solution. I'm seeing a lot.
and see, this is why Christian is a good guy, and he's actually one of the good guys, I think. Again, scientifically, I would critique some of the knowledge claims he made, but that's not his fault. He's in an industry. He didn't know I was going to ambush him, and sadly his VA didn't do the research to know what my scientific standards are for knowledge, and so that's not necessarily his fault per se. But he's curious. He's asking the right questions, and so I think he would do well if he adopted a science paradigm. I don't know if I can let him join because he's a member of OMG. If I let him join the group, then OMG is going to get all my information, which is not quite how I like to operate. I give him a licensing deal, but which is what I offered Chase Reiner, which he didn't like. He whined and complained about it. But he's asking the right questions, right? So let's see what his questions about synonyms is about.
That they're in certain industries, they really almost like they're not paying attention as much to keyword targeting anymore. They're really moving towards the kind of, I don't want to say topic relevancy, but yeah, this kind of stuff. More semantically speaking, they understand the page, they know what you do, and they evaluate all the other factors. Are you covering the better services that the competitors do? Or is your website really crap compared to theirs in terms of the depth of the information presented? So I'm seeing quite a little bit more of that now, and I think that gives.
Again, there's Josh with his poker face. Do you think it's LSI? Do you think it's TF-IDF? What do you think it is?
Again, if we circle back to the links issue, I do agree that some agencies, they've only been saying
It's none of those things, by the way. It's not LSI, and it's not TF-IDF.
links forever, and so they have to do, because they never bothered to learn all this stuff. They never evolved, so
Right.
they are a bit like dinosaurs, referring to your background.
Yeah. Sadly, yes. That is the state of the SEO industry again because they're not doing the scientific testing. And so, yes, in our testing, we have noticed that exact thing, that Google is choosing a lot of more synonyms, and we know the exact reasons why. They're not actually choosing synonyms at all. It has nothing to do with synonyms. And they're doing it in two different ways in two different places. They are doing that, and so we've been able to isolate that with two separate algorithms, actually. That as well. So yeah. So
interesting. What about the entities? Have you noticed much of a correlation between your client's page or your test page containing certain natural language entities versus the other page not containing them, for example? Is the page more saturated with those entities that they recognize performing better than the page without meaningful entities?
Ah, that's a very good question, and I'm glad you used the word entity in the proper way. People in the SEO industry think that entities is like this vaguism that refers to your brand or something, or that Google
No, no.
database thinking about your company, or you're a person with these properties, you're a company with these properties. Maybe because that's kind of how Google talked about it to start off with. But no, entities technically has to do with Google's natural language processing algorithm. You can see it right on the Google natural language processing API demo page. It uses the word entity right there. It's true, they do. There is a couple subtle places when you're reading Google's documentation. They're using terminology from actually the proper semantic engines that they're actually using, and you can get a bit of a hint. They use this word, and they only use this word in this. So yes, I definitely agree that, and that's a very good question. I definitely agree that yes, entities in that NLP uh, uh, um, rubric, and that NLP connotation only. Yes, entities are important, and yes, Google's tracking them, but it's actually surprisingly not in any way that anybody thinks that they are. It's actually much dumber than everyone thinks that it is. And just by using that tool randomly is not going to help you rank. So I don't want to lead people astray thinking you could run to that demo tool and throw your web page in there and look at what it says, and that'll tell you anything at all that's important. Really, not really. Or you can like, if you try to jury rig your content by throwing LSI words in there, and LSI is not how the NLP works, by the way, but some other tools are kind of faking it, and cough 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 pop cough are faking it and saying that LSI has something to do with NLP, which it doesn't, nothing at all. And they're gonna give you your LSI keywords and then say, well, you stuff more of your LSI keywords in your page, then your NLP category score is going to go up, and that means you're going to rank better for your keywords. That it's complete and utter horseshit. It has no scientific basis whatsoever. I can disprove it if you want me to. It has nothing to do with anything. That's not how that's not how it works at all. That's like saying if you pour protein shake on your feet after you're done working out, you will build better muscle mass and be able to lift 10% harder next month. That's not how it works, right? that's not what's going on there. And it's even worse. It's like if you pour water on your feet. So that's the LSI keywords, and not being applied in the right way. That's what's going on there. But that's not how it works at all. Yeah. But there is something to it. And so it's interesting that Christian's a good guy. He's clever. He's curious. He's thinking, looks like there's something going on here. This kind of stuff's going on. That's where it starts, folks. That's where, curiosity is where it starts. But rigorous science is where it needs to end up. And that's where the power comes in, and the super knowledge and the payoff for your curiosity. Can't really say more about that, but yes, it's definitely come up in my testing. And sure. I think some of your field observations are definitely on the right track.
Yeah, I've been dabbling in building a tool that extracts entities from competitors' page.
Him and everybody else. But so I guess he's in good company. That's a new thing that you can do.
Just compares them to your entities, gives you like a little basic count and the connections between them. I think there are quite a few people working on this kind of stuff at the moment. Mm-hmm. It's trying to nail particularly the area of entities, because if I was Google and I was involving my language understanding, I would want to base it on facts and real things. Mm-hmm. And entities are the actual. So should you base your SEO theory on facts derived by controlled, rigorous scientific testing? Blue on a blue background, just so people don't see it. To the time now, to the one we have nowadays, yes. Huge difference. So I think that it's all good moves. I am very grateful that they are making the game a lot more interesting, because 6-7 years ago, 8 years ago, when it was just about spamming links and keywords, it was boring. So that's maybe a great question to go out on. A couple of years ago, it was easier to do. 5-10 years ago, for sure. And anybody with like a high school level education could get into it. And it was just buying links and putting your
your keywords in the URL and title. Really, that
Of
was
course.
it. Maybe in H1. Um, and now it's evolved to be very, very complicated. And you're playing chess, like I said, with some of the smartest programmers in the world. If you're trying to reverse engineer the algorithm, or even trying to just understand what Google wants, you're trying to pick apart the public relations speak of some of the smartest people in the world. One of the richest companies in the world that is an expert at public relations backtalk,
Of
to
course.
try to make it impossible for you to really know what you're doing, but trying to give you advice, but not give you any advice really. Like we don't track eat in any of our algorithms, but directly, but we try to get there anyway. Like what is that even supposed to mean?
It's
So am I
not part
supposed
of the
to?
algorithm, but we pay attention to it or something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
very misleading terms there.
Yes. So the haphazard. That's a recent butchered quote, but a recent quote of Danny Sullivan. The answer he just gave to Barry Schwartz over Twitter. And yeah, very misleading attempt at Google to try to help people by telling them absolutely everything and nothing simultaneously. And we see the results. We see the companies that go out of business. We see the SEOs that go out of business. We see how much smaller the industry gets. We see, because of the scarcity, the link prices get raised up, like we're talking about. Where, Christian, do you think the SEO industry is going to be in 5 or 10 years? Do you think there's even going to be an SEO industry in 5 or 10 years?
I think the set of skills that good SEOs possess will be universal because there will always be search. Whether that search will happen on Amazon or on TripAdvisor or on Booking or whatever the platform the search is happening on, a good SEO will always be useful. I think we don't have to just rely on this one single platform. It's just because people search on Google at the moment. If they start to search somewhere else, there is already plenty of action going on in App Store optimization, Play Store optimization, Amazon, yeah, plenty of action there as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not concerned about the future in that sense. If Google ever stops providing the service, well, we switch to Bing, we switch to DuckDuckGo, we'll see what else is out there because people will move, right? Google will be making money where people, what people are doing, and at the moment it's searching. So I'm plenty sure that even if one day they decide to just display the one search, or everyone magically will suddenly switch to speaking to their phones and wanting to hear the answer, that's just the direct answer from Google and whatnot, and there's still all of that search.
Let
I'm
me
sure
ask you
that
this. Let me ask you this, Christian. Do you think SEO for Google will ever get to a point where it's too hard for the vast majority of people to do? And
I hope so.
in that way, the SEO industry will die. You hope so.
I think it's going in that direction, and I do hope so. As they minimize the link signals and as they improve the on-page signals, well, sadly enough, they're pushing brand signals together with the on-page, but that's another case, another story.
No, they're not doing that at all.
I do hope so because the more difficult it gets, the more people that can do it shine, right? If anyone could do it.
That's the other problem with SEO that I just noticed is that it's like gossip. It's like everyone likes to gossip and everyone likes to chatter, and social media lends itself to that. The SEO industry wouldn't be half so bad if social media didn't exist, because then we would have less chances to gossip, and we'd probably have more time to do science and figure out what the real ranking factors are, and have much better success and dominate much better.
Like 10 years ago, I was just a monkey working in front of the computer pressing buttons. Nowadays I'm a specialist because I'm still getting great results with the clients. So
right.
I see that the more difficult it gets, the more people will fall off the back of it, and the less people will want to enter because the entry point has been always very low in SEO, right? Do it for a year or 2 years and you're an expert.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, right.
But you don't go to an operation table you don't get to an operation table in a hospital after 2 years.
That's correct. Right? So without science and without an educational background like the surgeon you talked about, where do you think the SEO will be in 5 or 10 years? What chances will somebody have come into the industry if they don't have the science and they don't have the educational background?
I think they'll be working probably, SEO has plenty of departments and there will be more different SEO departments as time goes. Still plenty of space for content people, for outreach people, for people that are good for relationship building.
So what he says here is that you're going to have to work for somebody else, is essentially what he's saying, which is some good news. It's like, okay, well, there's still work to do in the industry. You could be a writer. You could just do HTML. You can do smaller things, but it means smaller salaries. It means less freedom. It means you can't work from home, probably. You might not be able to work from home. That might change. Some businesses are letting people work from home, but it means you're going to have a boss. if you can't, you're not going to be able to be your own boss. You're not going to be able to capitalize on this affiliate offer, that affiliate offer. You're not going to be able to really get into the internet gold mine. You're going to be a team member on someone else who's making money on the internet gold mine. Whatever little bit of internet gold still exists. So I thought that's interesting. I think a lot of my listeners will find it interesting as well. In that, you can still do it, but you're gonna have to work for somebody else. And you notice how the other groups have to band together as well. All my previous previous friends who are now competitors, Ted, Clint, what's the other guy's name? Kyle, that's his name. IMG, all those guys have now banded together to make their own group to compete with me, or just to survive in the industry. And that's what's happening, right? When things get tough, you got to tribe up. And that's what's happening in the industry, which I think is an interesting kind of consequence you can see as well. And so it's not going to be good for the sole proprietor. It's not going to be good for the at-home SEO who's doing affiliate SEO or trying to make money doing that kind of stuff. To chart your own course, to make your own money, to set your own salary, to set your own revenue, to set your own hours. Those freedoms are going to get less and less, sadly, in the SEO industry. The less science you know, the less you're going to be able to do that. The more science you know, the more you're going to be able to do that. So you need your education. A surgeon needs an education to do the proper operations. You need to join an SEO group that has the proper science that either teaches you what the answer is or teaches you how to get the answer yourself. So I thought that was very interesting from Christian here. Let's see what else he has to say for the last just couple of minutes.
Working. So I think there's always and the SEO blends so much nowadays with brand building, experience of knowing when something happens, to having the experience of having seen this happen before so many times that you can almost see exactly what's happening. Right. So I do think that technical skills, that technical is going to start working again.
How web technology works, how HTML works, CSS, JavaScript, PHP, MySQL. And what we're talking about here is, keep in mind, the barrier to entry is just going to go up and up and up and up and up. Like we were talking about back before, when SEO was just buying links and script kiddies could do it. You didn't barely even need to know HTML, and HTML is super easy to learn anyway. You could just buy links and your websites would rank. You're going to need to know way more technologies. You're going to need to know way more scientific, stringent methods, marketing methods, measurement methods. It's going to be a much more difficult industry, especially to do on your own as things go on, to the point where there's going to be just high-level SEO groups who are doing science and the best science. And even then, it's going to start cutting into those guys as Google goes after us and starts to do that. And it's going to be only the strongest are going to survive. Only the strongest are going to have the information they need there. Technologies, how all that...
being able to read the code of a web page and actually look at the code and see what's happening within it. And many SEOs nowadays don't know. They just kind of website with Screaming Frog or whatever tool they use, and that's it. They export a CSV file.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, doing science without knowing that is impossible, because Google doesn't rank web pages on WordPress names or things. Google ranks web pages on what makes a web page in the genetics of it, and that's the codes. All right, Christian. Well, thanks very much. It's been a great conversation. That's been an hour. I won't keep you any longer. Is there any final plugs you want to put in there?
Yes, definitely the plugin. Go to the WordPress directory, type in FAQ Schema. You're currently ranking #1. It is an excellent plugin. We are about to roll out the new version. I am pressing that button though. Personally, at the moment, I have this honor, but there's plenty good happening there. Very good results for the clients, very good visibility increases, and to one-on-one listening. I mean, I definitely have to get more into this testing that you've been speaking about. This very scientific testing. You did tickle my interest, to say the least. So,
okay.
So no doubt, you have a new avid listener.
Great.
Follower. So I'm very
glad to hear it.
Very grateful for the conversation, and looking forward to future.
I appreciate it. I hope this was a good conversation for you. It was for me. You'll find this interview on my channel a little bit later. I'm going to add in some of my secondary thoughts into it, but I just want you to know that just some secondary thoughts, not skewering this pure guy at all in any way. I thought it was a good conversation. I think you're a good guy. I welcome everybody out there to to go download his plugin and test it out for yourself, see how it works. And I think your commitment to science is a good thing. And I hope that you follow it up and maybe even do more. So thanks very much, Christian, for your time. And
Thank you very much.
thanks everyone for watching the show, and we'll see you next time. So, as I said, folks, that was an interview with Christian, who I said is a good guy. And go download his plugin, see if it works for you. I'm very happy to give him some exposure in that regard, and maybe some value, although just being skewered by the nasty scientists who wanted just to talk about some of the information. So I hope you enjoyed the show. I see there's not very many questions. So if you have any questions for me, you can email me at joshbachynski@gmail.com. And you can find out more information about my science group there. As I said, I'm accepting applications. You can go through the application process. And good luck in the SERPs, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.